Welcome to another edition of Maximum Growth Live, the July 9th edition of Maximum Growth Live. I am Jay Ruane, one of your hosts, with my good friend right over here, Seth Price. Seth, how are you doing this week?
Doing great. It's good to be back, and not that being at the beach and working wasn't good, but having all the things around you at home makes it that much more efficient.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I keep thinking about wanting to travel, but I have everything I need right here at home. And it's like, why take that risk? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I have a feeling that we're going to be spending a lot more time at home in the coming years. So that's
It's
just,
too bad because to me, like European travel was the best. You'd wake up, spend a day with your family. When the kids got tired in the early mid afternoon, you come home, work's just starting the East Coast. You jam for 4 or 5 hours. Then there's a late European dinner. That to me was the ultimate. I really love that.
I saw something this week that Barbados is looking to extend 12-month work visas for people who may be able to go and work remotely from Barbados. And I'm thinking, if I can make all of my court appearances and responsibilities done, it wouldn't be bad to live on a beach in Barbados for 6 or 9 months. And be able to live that sort of lifestyle. I never thought it was going to be possible. I'm not Lee Rosen. I never thought it was going to be possible to sort of travel the world, but with the pandemic happening and everybody going remote, it's becoming more and more a possibility. So it's kind of enticing.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
Lee Rosen has grown kids. Between you and me, we got 7 kids. That wild card makes it that much harder to both travel and work remotely. It's the
Oh,
dream, but
and
not
trust me,
easier
it's a
said
lot.
than done.
Oh, and the funny thing about it is that we wouldn't get to do Little League. Little League started last night. It was an awesome time. It was great getting back out there, even with all the new things. No, can't use the dugout. Got to be 6 feet apart. No handshakes. Nothing. It still was great being able to see the little kids out there playing ball and being on the field with them, doing some coaching. So I'm happy to getting back into the kind of normalcy that we used to have. That's for sure. One of the things we were talking about this past Tuesday on the Lawyer Mastermind call was, how to know what is right for you. So let's talk a little bit about that because I think it's something that needs to really be expanded upon in this session. Seth, what are your thoughts?
Well, look, when back in the old normal, when much of at least my learning was going to conferences, hearing speakers, and bringing back action items, I preached making top 10 lists at conferences. And it's funny, I just saw a viral video about the great investor from Omaha and how he would make a list of things you wanted to accomplish, take the 5 and forget everything else. I guess I had come up with my own version. I'm not as wealthy as him, but I take my top 10 list from a conference, put 3 things I'm going to hit when I get home, 3 things that I'm going to sort of start planting seeds for, but aren't going to be done in short term, and 4 things that are going to have to wait. And I did this religiously on flights home. And I think what's interesting right now is we don't have that out of the office experience where we get to sit and focus on things. For the most part, it's a continuum, and Facebook and Facebook groups and webinars have sort of taken the place of these destinations where you really spend a fair bit of time thinking about and planning for what you want to do in your business. And I think it's fascinating how, particularly within the Max Law community, when things get posted, they take on lives of their own. And figuring out, Jay, something you and I talk about is what's right for you versus what's right for the person giving that advice. And it's not always an easy answer because you need to sort of continuously think about where you are, resources that you have, and what you want for your own practice, rather than just every shiny object or every idea that's given immediately jumping on.
That's a really interesting point. And, a couple of years ago, I actually hired a CFO, an outsourced CFO to come into my practice. And I said, I want an annual budget. And I sat down with him and I said, we need an annual budget. I want to know exactly where I'm going to be. I want to know to the dollar what I'm going to make at the end of the year. And he looked at me, he goes, people don't run businesses like this. It's just, the idea of an annual budget is something that is just impossible given the market changes, the practice changes you're going to have. What you want is sort of a rolling budget where you're moving forward. And it took me a while to sort of rethink about, I thought I was going to be successful when I was able to say, yeah, here's my annual budget. And what I'm really more successful at is being able to adapt, improvise, overcome, succeed, that type of thing. But I think this is something that we can talk about for a good 45 minutes. So why don't we put a pin in that? And today what we're going to do is we're going to bring in another hot seat. We had a very successful one a couple of weeks ago. So this week we have Kyle. Kyle is a personal injury lawyer in Tennessee who's just launched his practice within this year. And boy, what a time to do it. So what I'd love to do right now is actually put a pin in our discussion about, where to go next, and bring in Kyle so we can talk about the challenges of his practice. What do you say?
That's great. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Okay, so right now I'm going to bring in Kyle. All right, Seth, we're joined here now on Max Growth Live with Kyle Peiter. Kyle is a personal injury lawyer in the Nashville area. Kyle, how are you doing today?
Doing just fine, just fine.
Fantastic.
Thank you
Now,
for having
Kyle,
me.
we're having you here on the show because you did something that a lot of people, a lot of people are jealous of. You launched your own practice, but you did it in January of this year. Little did you know that, 3 months later, a massive sea change to the way the world operates was going to happen. How are you handling this transition during the pandemic as a brand new lawyer?
Sure. Well, I moved to Nashville because I had a wonderful life down in Atlanta, and my wife is also a lawyer, and she got a wonderful job opportunity up here in Nashville. And I said, happy wife, happy life, and decided to start my own firm up here. And in January, I opened up, and it was going very well, and I had a nice business plan, and was planning on following that plan, A, B, C, D, and then, of course, COVID hits, and all the plans go out the window, and you have to figure out, how to pivot, frankly, and it's not easy. It's very difficult to build a law firm when you're in an absolutely new city and don't know anyone, and you don't have any real relationships yet. And it's been a very interesting sort of time to learn how to build relationships via the internet, and mostly doing your social interactions through a video screen, as opposed to actually going to a person and meeting them in person. They're doing all that fun stuff with networking. So
it reminds me of sort of, I remember when I went to study abroad, you were like, you had 6 months, you wanted to meet as many people as possible. When we first launched our law firm, and every single coffee or lunch I could get, I would take. I guess the good news is people had a lot of free time, and you could sort of do these meetups and Skypes, and people were embracing the digital technology, but it's not the same as that in person. Have you seen the ability to, what have you done to sort of help connect, understanding that it's been much, much harder to get that pressing of the flesh that works so well in a non-pandemic time?
Well, the one thing that I did do right before COVID was I joined a nice networking group called BNI, and fortunately they did start to have they have opportunities for people to have networking on their via Zoom and stuff like that. So a lot of my stuff right now has been focused on building up relationships through other networking stuff like BNI, and the ability to have one-on-one conversations and do them via Zoom. So that's one of the ways I've really pivoted. I haven't been able to target as much local community as I wanted to because of COVID. That's been more of my issue right now, but I'm still able to reach out and people in the same sort of networking organizations and do basic one-on-ones for like an hour or something like that, and that's been a blessing in itself. So.
And then something Jay and I have talked about in prior weeks, Jay, I'd love to get your thoughts, was what I saw, and I think Jay also saw during COVID, was that the referral-based business took a significant hit. If cases came in, it was generally through digital or other forms of marketing, so that in one sense, the opportunity costs are low. If you're just in the midst of building those relationships, it's almost like if you're going to have a time when the payoff isn't there, you're in the, I assume, in that period where you just put your head down and every single contact, no coffee is a bad idea, get the brand and the name out, and that once you sort of have a period of time in town, you can start being a little bit more directed with potential more meaningful referral sources, rather than right now it's just getting a foothold and making up for lost time.
Yeah, that's a good point. But also, I'll add even to that is a lot of personal injury right now has really, if you're not having fun, you're not getting hurt, and it's especially true when you're driving. If you're not driving, people are not driving right now, or especially in March and April, they were not. So I've had to really pivot what I'm taking as far as a caseload goes in. And what my actual sort of parameters are for cases. Like, for example, I'm focusing, a lot of people have dogs nowadays, and I'm looking more for dog bites, and I'm looking more for people are putting swimming pools, so I'm looking for more like swimming pool, cases and involving personal injuries for that, because it's kind of hard to bring a case if people are just staying home, you can't really sue yourself. So, it's been an interesting challenge with the caseload as well.
Yeah, that's certainly something interesting, and I think that's a good point for our listeners. Is that, you know, just because you call yourself a personal injury lawyer doesn't mean that there aren't multiple niches within that you can go after, and being able to focus your attention on the dog bites, the injuries at people's homes, and that type of thing is a great way to sort of focus on it. What are you doing to generate that business in the area of dog bite? Are you putting out more content? Are you what steps have you done? Because I have a couple ideas for you, but I want to know exactly what you're doing first before I can give them to you.
Well, I guess the first thing I did was hire Blue Shark. So that was very nice to be able to get a firm that would produce content in areas that can kind of pivot, as opposed to just doing your standard rote kind of stuff. So that's been a nice thing. And also, like I said, I do my networking, and I talk generally. I have a 30-second commercial every time, and I try to go through all the sort of what people are doing necessarily now. Like I said, they have puppies. They're putting in swimming pools. They're going boating, for example. This morning I just talked about there was an extreme rise in Nashville for COVID cases that are due to a lot of bar owners keeping their bars open actually when they were supposed to be closed, and that was a huge problem. So now I'm going to go after like COVID cluster cases. So I'm giving commercials as like 30-second little commercials with that. As far as on social media and stuff like that, I'm an 80-year-old man. When it goes to social media, I've never done it. I grew up in the woods. I didn't do any of that kind of stuff when I was a kid. So anything you can have I'm trying to get my wife to help me out a little bit with that. So any suggestions?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm a social media guy. I was on your social media, and there wasn't much there to look at. So, that's certainly something I want to talk to you about down the line. Things that you can do along in social media to sort of build your brand locally, because I think that's something that could help you. It's interesting that you talk about those COVID cluster cases, because I know for a fact up by me there were a bunch of speakeasy type Corona cafes or COVID cafes, where bars were actually staying open and serving people. They put curtains up in the windows because they're trying to stay open and trying to make a living, and you understand that these are guys that and women that are just trying to keep their business alive. But there are definitely some negative health impacts of that. So it's really a sort of a balancing test, and it's great that you found a niche that you might be able to use to drive some business your way. I do want to talk to you a little bit about one thing on your website, which I noticed, and ask you in your downtime since, say, mid April through now, so let's go 10 weeks, I've seen one blog post on your website. Is
Yeah,
Why do you
that
have a blog if you're not going to use it?
that was the problem. That's why I
Okay,
hired Blue Shark.
Yeah.
gotcha.
So
And look, and to be fair, Jay, one of my philosophies, I understood like whether a blog should be filled in. Yeah, there should be some placeholders, but that when you're starting a practice, generally, what I hate, I'm going to go on a soapbox for a second. It's the old regurgitated news blogs to move away from. I think when a practice is new, you have so many fundamental pages that need to be written, and when you're figuring out what to do with finite resources, you're new to town, you want to build out dog bites, you want to build out swimming pool accidents, not that you want to ignore car and truck accidents. And there's so much fundamental building blocks that to me always come first before an interesting blog that may or may not get any traction. So I think, Jay, that has been sort of a personal struggle for myself. And over the years, when we get a website, very often our first thing that we do is just eviscerate the old blog content because it's just holding the site down, and focus on the monetizable evergreen building blocks that will make money once they rank.
That's a good point, Seth. And Kyle, I'm not going to step away from you too long, but Seth, this is a really interesting point because whenever anybody is in the process of deciding that they're going to, create either a new website or update their new website, inevitably the web designer says, and we'll add a blog to it because you can then add your content very easily. You can put stuff up. What is your thoughts on that? Because I'm of the philosophy for our websites that we have at our firm, if we're not going to be actively blogging, we don't even want a blog as part of the website because I don't want people to log in and see that we're not actually putting stuff up there or at least putting stuff up regularly. What's your position on that?
No, I mean that's exactly right. I mean, you certainly don't want that. You don't want a bad user experience. I talk about this with Jay, and I've talked about that. If you're not going to blog, if the blog is for the lawyer to put their musings out, whether they say it, whether they type it in and turn it over, whether it's recorded and put on, look. There are blogs that rank nationally for competitive terms websites that use the blog, and those blog posts get resonated. They link internally. There are plenty of things you can do with a blog, but if somebody is, I think Jay's point is well taken. If you're not going to, the idea of just turning that off and focusing on, there's so much to be done with the evergreen content before you move it to a blog section. To me, the blog is just web pages. And if you're building it out is as a silos of content for the different areas you want to be found for, to me that's step one. Unless you happen to be that guy who loves to blog and wants to get a specific voice or message out, but the idea I have seen historically, just like in Jay's world of social media, we talked about this on prior shows, $2,500 a month for organic social media content is a complete, I think, scam, because there's no way to monetize that if it's being done by a third party in some sort of perfunctory way. I feel like the same thing is true for blog content, that you either have great content, whether it's in a silo or whether it's on the blog, but the blog itself is almost a non-issue. It can be left for later once you have your fundamental basics there, even turned off, maybe a good idea, Jay, in this case. Or if you are going to do it, putting something out periodically that is real and meaningful, but not there just to check a box, just like as Jay talks about at FirmFlex, having real social media posts and not a person who says, okay, I'm supposed to do this now in a perfunctory way to check the box, moving away from check the box and focused on what is great content that will resonate with users and ideally the Google bot.
So, Kyle, here's something that we've talked about on prior shows, and I think it's something that you should take away from it. Um, Both Seth and I are big proponents of if you love it, you're going to do it. And if you don't love it, you're not going to do it. You said something earlier that, I'm not really a social media guy. It's not my thing. I grew up in the woods, right? If that's the case, then maybe social media is not for you. Because if you don't have a passion to put yourself out there, and be talking about those things, even if your wife is going to be able to help you, it may be not the right play for you at this point in your building of your practice. So let's identify the things that you do like doing and find ways to actually get return on those types of investment. Sounds to me like you enjoy the BNI type of networking. And so that's certainly something that you could look to other things. But what are the things that you enjoy doing that promote your firm that we can focus on?
Well, actually, I enjoy learning. So that's something I really super enjoy is figuring out how to better myself. And that's one of the reasons that I was, I would actually like to learn how to do social media. So it's not something that, it's just something I'm not used to but and it's probably something, that I'll probably get into, especially since it's new and I kind of like learning new things. So yeah, I mean, I like doing the BNI stuff, but I don't want to just, I think social media is definitely incredibly important right now to build out, a brand and have visibility. And I think that's incredibly important. And especially, I'd like to, I like learning. So, I don't think it's a bad fit necessarily. It's just I don't know enough about it yet to be really that savvy.
Well, look, I'll throw an idea out there that I'm hearing. Mo has his Mo show for years. I'm right now trying to launch a local show of some sort, with the idea being interviewing movers and shakers. I've moved away from BNI, but at this point I've been here long enough that I know who the sort of power players of business are, who those other connectors are. And the idea is, what if you just took these different Zoom meetings you're doing and said, hey, call it something. Here's, I'd love you to be part of my podcast, record the Zoom, use that for audio content. Is it going to be perfect? No, but that could become your blog, right? So now you have relevant content on a blog that fills it. It's not going to be hyper PI centric, but then you can sort of say, hey, here's the posting on my blog with our interview. And then if they link back to you, all of a sudden, now you're doing SEO and you didn't even realize it. So taking the BNI connections and all that work you're already doing and trying to repurpose it, as content. Is it the best content? No. But is it relevant to the area? Yes. And then if you can get those people, sort of say, how often are those people featured online, whether it be in audio or video form, then asking for that link. To me, that's the 360. If you can get that going, then it's not that much more incremental work than you're doing already.
I got another idea for you if you're willing to take one.
Sure.
So one of the things that I think that you can do if you want to get active on social media is let's start doing what social media is meant for, and that's for building relationships. So here's an idea that I want to throw out there. Get in touch with the leaders of some local charities and get in touch with some local restaurants. Now, obviously, with everything that's going on right now, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to set it up. But here's my concept. Restaurants are hurting. Charities are hurting, right? But if you can get somebody from a charity to a local restaurant and have a conversation, a 30-minute conversation over lunch, socially distant, of course, where you say, tell me about your charity. Tell me about the people that you serve. Why did you get into this charity? Who are some of your success stories? Oh, by the way, here's the restaurant that we're eating at. This is the dish that they did. Have the chef come out and say, I made you this, I made you that. The chef gets some free publicity. The charity gets some publicity. You're making connections. The restaurant will then share your social video. The charity will share your social video out to who it is. At the end, you add a 15-second bumper about, I'm Kyle. I'm a personal injury lawyer. Thank you very much. If you want to support these charities or this restaurant, here's their URLs. So basically what you're doing is you're actually creating a synergy where the restaurant and the chef and the owner of the restaurant get exposed to a new audience. The charity people get exposed to a new audience, and you sort of are in the middle. It sort of reminds me. I don't know if you watched the show. Seth, you're old like me. Kyle's a young guy, but you're old like me. You might remember What's Happening. Remember What's Happening? one of my favorite episodes was when Dee got one girl to do the English homework for in exchange for history, and one girl to do the history homework in exchange for English, and she just sat back in the middle, collected the homework, and then passed it off the other way. That's what you're going to do. You're going to be in the middle.
But Jay, what's ironic is this probably dovetails to our opening segment, which is these are all great ideas. And you're sitting there saying, hey, I need more cases in the door now in order to, keep this going. And I would just say present company included, everything you're hearing with a grain of salt. And I'll take you back to my maniacal side, which is if you're trying to build a PI shop, to me, there's nothing better than if somebody's injured, they're searching. And every ounce of energy that can be put towards helping with content, pushing links out there, working on reviews for your Google My Business, to me, that is the number one thing. That's sort of the yin yang of Jay and myself. So while all these social ideas are great and you're new to town and you got to do something, if you met nobody in town and you stayed as a hermit, but you get your Google My Business popping and you get 100 reviews and you spend every waking moment making sure that every business contact you have is reviewing you, et cetera, to me, that's going to make you more money more quickly. Not that these aren't all good ideas, but you're going to have to sit down and prioritize what makes sense and, frankly, what you enjoy doing. Because if you enjoy doing it, it will work. But if the idea of coordinating and sitting outside and risking COVID isn't for you, Jay's idea may be the best idea in the world, but it just won't ever happen. And you got to figure out what is meaningful to you, what you enjoy, and what you think gives you the best chance of getting long-term ROI.
Gotcha.
It's a lot to take in all at once, Kyle.
No.
I assure you.
It's fine. I'm actually meeting with, I do charity work every Thursday, so that's kind of one of my things that I do. So I can sit down with those people and talk to them. I was actually thinking about maybe doing it's just a little charity group where people call in and they have legal problems. I kind of help them out and kind of talk through it or whatever. Anything that's kind of semi-related to personal injury. Usually it's just consumer issues and stuff like that. I was thinking about if I could get their permission to record them and do that.
Well, I'll take it one more step. I love that charity play. That to me is a win-win, because my theory is anything that's not yours, and what are the odds there's going to be a great PI case there, but it gives you the opportunity to refer those cases potentially to other people. Now, if it's all low income, it's going to be pro bono, but it gives you an opportunity to reach out to the legal community and say, hey, I got a potential family law case here. I have somebody who needs a guardian ad litem. Court might be paying for that, so that if you could take the intake in our market, there's a walk-in place that a lot of the PI lawyers do, and ethically they can't take those cases, but they're always farming out all those different legal issues. It puts you front of mind, because look, you could do all the social media you want, but right now the great thing about PI when you're new is that other PI players can be your best source of referrals. People who get too big, who don't want to do the smaller cases that you're willing to do when you're young and hungry. And to me, I'm always torn. It's a whole nother conversation, but BNI, like anything, if you dig deep enough and you enjoy it, you want to go for those breakfasts, great. But the odds of somebody having a case, to me, and again, I would think as a new lawyer that networking to the top shops in town that really turn their nose up to anything under $25,000, they're looking for somebody who's going to do those cases, do them well. And if you're willing to hustle and do those smaller ones and build those relationships, to me, that would be a more clear ROI opportunity than hoping that the guy with the DJ company or the insurance guy happens to get a PI case. They could, and if you dig deep anywhere, there are cases, but continuously thinking about where you're fishing for those cases.
Hey,
Sure.
Kyle, let me ask you one thing. When you're talking to these people, when you're doing your charity work, are you able to ask them for a review? Because you are not necessarily solving their problem and handling their case, but they could give you a review. Hey, I talked to Kyle. He listened to me. He heard my story. He pointed me in the right direction. Adding those people that you've spoken to as reviews will help your local listing, because
I think that may be the best idea of the show. It costs nothing. You're already doing it, and making sure that every person you're giving legal advice to doesn't violate Google's guidelines. It's you. If something goes wrong, your bar license is at issue because you're giving legal advice. So if you're able to say, hey, I'm giving legal advice, and they get a review, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually something that was probably what I was gonna do next week. Actually, so
Or
you're,
what about all the people you met with in the past? Sending
yeah,
those links out. So to me, that's full contact. I mean, look, you're getting your charity fix in, you're helping people out. You hopefully can network with other lawyers as those people need help in other areas, even if it's pro bono. It gives you a reason to pick up the phone and network with those lawyers. And the idea that you could get a review out of it, I think Jay wins gold star on this one.
Yeah, the idea of I get calls all the time, from friends, from, people outside my immediate network who say, well, I got your name from somebody, and can you answer this question? It might be an eviction question, or it might be a probate question. I may be sending them off to another lawyer or telling them they got no case, right? But I always say, hey, look, if I helped you out, can you give me a review? I mean, I probably have more reviews that were not for my actually representing somebody, but for just answering questions, because those are really low hanging fruit, and people are happy to repay the favor of talking to you. So I would
Absolutely,
definitely
but
encourage
Jay,
people.
and just keeping it real, and not that isn't genius what you're doing, but know that it may be 1 out of 3. It's
Right.
not going to be a 1-for-1 ratio. But if you don't throw the spaghetti at the wall, nothing sticks. So just keep throwing spaghetti at the wall. Jay, this has been tremendous. I think really enjoyed. Any final thoughts for us before we wrap up?
So on my end, Kyle, I want to give you something so that you can get into social media. So as everybody knows, we here at FirmFlex, we do daily social media coaching. So when we get off this call, I'm going to send you a link so that you can actually set up with our do-it-yourself program. This way, you are able to actually get instructed and taught how to handle social media for the next couple of weeks, so that you can get a feel for it. And this way, while business is a little slow, you could be posting stuff on social media and building that audience. So I'm going to get that to you at the end of the day today. And I expect everybody here on Max Growth Live to follow Kyle's social media, because everybody here in our audience is going to hold him accountable, and be commenting on the stuff that you post, starting next week. I'll give you a couple days. I'll give you tomorrow, then the weekend. Starting Monday, we're going to see you posting on social media, and people are going to be following you and commenting so that you're held accountable to it. Okay?
And I'm going to go the other direction, which is let's make sure there's enough interviews done to create that high quality content and build out those silos, and that every person you're speaking to, even if you have to, at the end of an intake, you're talking about these pro bono intakes, if the review link is sent to them, if it's not in person or if it is, making sure it's done while you're still there and getting that count up. Because if you could get your local reviews up to a meaningful number as a new guy in town, it gives you a fighting chance, particularly if offices can be located away from downtown. And when somebody comes up, you're like, okay, he solves my problem. He's in this place and he has enough reviews that it shows that he's a meaningful player.
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt you for a quick second, because actually Google reviews is something that I'm very familiar with. But however, I haven't been able to build those out because COVID, Google stopped reviewing people, or they stopped posting reviews on Google for a long, long time. So that is actually a campaign that I'm ramping up right now. In fact,
and just so you know, in theory, the ones you did during COVID should be posting now. And we have seen almost all of the reviews coming through in the end. It may take a while to get the count up, but I have found the disturbing part, this was the most frustrating, pained me the most, was that you thought people were leaving reviews, but you couldn't follow up with them when they said they did but didn't, or didn't do it right. And so one of the things that I think is really valuable is going back to your master list that you think should have posted and pinging them just as you would do if it wasn't COVID and you could see right away. Jay, how often do you ask for a review and it doesn't go up?
Oh,
Most of the time?
I'd say
More often than
80% of the
not.
time.
Right, exactly. So that all what you thought, hey, I got X number of reviews during COVID, you really got 20% of those coming through now, and your job is to find those other 80% or more, whatever the actual number is, and say, hey, would you mind, something went wrong, would you mind doing it again now? You just didn't have the ability to push them before, and now you do.
right. And now you can check and monitor and verify.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So, Kyle, I want to thank you so much for being on the call with us today. I think this was a great hot seat. I think you've got some good takeaways. To focus on sort of harvesting reviews from the charity work that you're doing, I think is a great takeaway from today. I think obviously being able to continue to push yourself out there and be willing to take on the task of social media. So I think you're heading in the right direction, and now it's just a matter of executing and being accountable. And I think you're going to be in great shape.
Thank you so much.
All right, Seth. Well, that was some good stuff that we got really sort of towards the end there with Kyle. We really got a couple of good takeaways, things that I think the audience can really adapt and use starting tomorrow with their contacts.
Absolutely.
Always be looking for that review. But of course, what do you know? We're running over time again. We're just
Absolutely. And
long-winded.
I was going to say, and I would say the one thing to think about is when you are opening in a new market, you have limited resources, not planting your pin in the middle of downtown where other people have spent years and hundreds, if not millions of dollars working on their web presence, and that by picking offices outside of downtown, that you have a better chance of more quickly gaining ROI from your digital. And I know Nalini has a one-pager on that anybody who is in that position where they're trying to break into a larger market, that it can be a very daunting uphill battle, and that one of the tricks to get around that is to plant a flag outside of the city center and try to at least get that neighborhood or quadrant of the city. It's not ideal, but you really are. May take years in order to get to the city center and focusing on some of those outlying areas.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sort of runs against, old school conventional lawyer wisdom, right? I can remember being a young lawyer looking at law space and being told, you got to be within walking distance of the courthouse. That's where all the lawyers are. And now, if you're jammed in with all the other lawyers, you're really doing yourself a disservice. And so,
Well, and I think you could you can have your cake and eat it too. You may work from that space for networking and court proximity, but if you don't have an office space that passes the Google test where you can either meet clients, but at least say, hey, I'm covering this area, and then bringing those cases to the courthouse or to a sister courthouse outside of that main flagship sort of high profile courthouse, fish where other people are not fishing. Always something that I think is a business truism, especially when you're starting out.
I love it. I love it. For a guy who grew up in the city and never fished, my two favorite things are put more lines in the water and fish where people aren't fishing. But there are analogies that speak to me. And so with that, Seth, we're going to end this edition of Maximum Growth Live. I want to thank everybody for being with us. I got Seth over here with me. Seth, goodbye. Good seeing you. We'll check in again next week. We'll see you next Thursday here for another edition of Maximum Growth Live. Bye for now, folks. Take it easy.